Welcome everyone to today's workshop on applying for Masters in Public Policy. Very quickly, I'll sort of introduce you to Project EduAccess and I'll introduce you to the panelists, and then I'll hand it over to them to take the presentation. They'll tell you, they'll give you an overview of public policy programs. They'll tell you why do a master's in public policy. How do you choose the program that's best for you? What does the timeline look like if you're making an application? Is there a work experience requirement? What are the application documents that you need to have prepared? What does a policy paper or a brief look like? If there is an interview for the program, what would that look like? They'll also discuss some scholarship opportunities that you can apply to or for when you are thinking of doing the MPP, and then they'll tell you about some career options that are available to you as a graduate of a public policy program, and then give you some general tips on making an application for the course, and then we move to the Q&A part of the video of the workshop. Very quickly, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are Project EduAccess. We're an organization, a network of students and professionals. We believe that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are systematically denied. And we try to improve inclusivity in these spaces by removing some of these barriers for marginalized communities in the global South. We do this by providing mentorship, engaging in advocacy, running capacity building workshops in person and online. And today's workshop is part of our sort of series of workshops that we've done on applying for higher education abroad. So we have with us three really wonderful people joining us and who'll speak to you about applying for an MPP. We have with us Gourangi, who some of you might have seen before in a workshop on the Charpak Scholarship. Gourangi graduated with a master's in public policy from the School of Public Affairs at Sciences Po in Paris. We have with us Daksh, who is currently doing a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School at Howard University. And we have with us Garima, who graduated with a Master of Public Policy from the Blavatnik School of Government at University of Oxford. Thank you so much, the three of you, for joining us today. And I'm sure our participants will learn a lot. Garima, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. So we will start with a quick overview of what is public policy and basically what distinguishes public policy from other degrees that you might have heard about are two things. One, it is a multidisciplinary course, so it helps you analyze things or view things from multiple perspectives. And secondly, all of this analytical thinking or the multiplicity perspectives are oriented towards helping decision makers or improving decision-making process that ultimately impact society and people at large. It draws from multiple disciplines. So if you are thinking of doing a public policy course, then you will end up studying a lot of different subjects like economics, political science, political philosophy, sociology, law. There's also a bit of statistics, econometrics, and nowadays evidence and evaluation components associated to a policy course. And the overall objective is that you're able to view a situation from different perspectives so that you can get a holistic understanding of the issue. So you're not necessarily basing your decisions which impact society through a single lens, but you're looking at it from multiple lenses. Now, this session is on MPP, but MPP can mean many things and different things depending on what course you're pursuing. And I think over the course of the slides, what we'll tell you is how the MPPs differ in structure, approach, focus, specializations, and so that you're equipped to choose a degree which is closest to your interests and desires. Misva, can you move next? Okay. Before we start, I think a big question that a lot of people ask is why an MPP? How is it different, and why should one be pursuing MPP? So taking forward what I was just talking about, I think the number one reason why people choose to do an MPP, why I chose to do an MPP despite having a background in engineering, was because I was pretty sure that I want to contribute meaningfully to the society, that I want to work on things which matter to me, causes which matter to me, and make a dent, contribute to the society in a more holistic way or a more comprehensive way, and really see the impact on people. And an MPP degree, I think, equips us through skills and other ways to be able to do this. It also comes with like the curriculum of MPP is usually very applied. It's less theoretical, unlike the other social sciences courses. And so because of this applied protocol, it helps you gain practical skills that will help you develop skills and impact, work in careers that will take you to your, a purposeful objective. It's also a degree which is generalist in nature. By that, what I mean is that it opens you up to a variety of careers. So my peers from the MPP course, for instance, some of them are working with the government, some with non-profit organizations, some have joined back as career civil servants. Some of them are also working in the private sector now. So essentially, it's a very it's not a specialist degree, and it will help you get skills which can be applied in several contexts. However, we see that most of the people end up going into development sector. What is also unique to the MPP program is its emphasis on leadership development. So for instance, at Oxford, there were dedicated courses on leadership development. But overall, I think the idea is to help people or help us make better decisions. And there's a lot of emphasis on ensuring that you emerge as stronger leaders at the end of the course. An MPP also offers valuable networking opportunities. This is because the school typically the government department typically have a lot of connections with organizations and professionals which are often invited to the school. But also when you are studying in a cohort which is working very, very closely, you do end up forming relationships which help you in your career as well. Can you move next, Ms. Ba? Great. So if any of that resonated with you, and if you are oriented towards wanting to do an MPP or learning to do more about it, then the next question that comes is how to choose an MPP. The first thing here is to really think about your own interests and career goals. And what I would suggest to everyone who's listening in is to just take a blank sheet of paper and write down what would your ideal career include. And it's useful to do that before you start looking at courses, mainly because there are lots of courses out there. There's everything and anything for everyone. And so it's helpful to start with some kind of orientation. It's okay if you're confused. You can still start listing with what you would like to do and what you would not like to do. I think the next step that comes here, because I was alluding to how there are different kinds of MPPs which are being offered, is to start looking up what are these different kinds of MPPs. So we have tried to summarize different categories here, but essentially you can broadly categorize MPP into two categories. One is a general MPP degree, and the other one is a specialized program. So by general degree, I mean that they don't have a sectoral focus, and you can go in with any background, and you can come out and pivot your career into any into any direction. The other set of policy programs are more specialist in nature, and they will tend to have a dedicated component of the curriculum on a particular subject. So for example, environmental policy or health policy or social policy. Often policy programs are a mix of both. So they are generalist, but they enable you to take electives towards the end of the course so that you can develop those generalist skills, but also develop a depth into one or two sectors. So that is also an option. But it helps to know whether if you have very clear interests, then it might help to do a specialist program, because it helps you deepen your expertise in that one area. But if you don't have one interest, then MPP is a great degree to go and build on a varied kind of skills and interests and knowledge. You will also notice that few programs tend to emphasize on specific components. So for example, there are a lot of people who are interested in international policy or in advocacy or international relations. So it is nice to look at the curriculum of the program and see if it offers that. There are others who are more interested in econometrics or economic side of things, and you want a quantitative MPP. So there are also courses which offer that, typically in the US. There are also courses, you can also do a public policy degree as a dual degree. So you can apply to 2 degrees, and if you get selected for both, then you can make that combination into a dual degree combination and come out with 2 degrees. So some of the very common combinations that people opt for are the MBA, LLM, which is law, and environmental studies. But you have to look at different universities offer different combinations. All in all, to say that, MPP course is quite flexible and varied. So there is something for everyone, and you can actually you'll have to spend some time looking at the curriculum to understand which one is the closest to what you want to do. Related to that point of reading the curriculum, it's also helpful to look at the research centers at the school. So for example, at Blavatnik school, they have a research center in economic growth, they have a research center in education. And what really attracted me was that the research center education was looking at the global south mainly and looking at it in a quite focused manner. And so I tracked the research being done at that center. I looked at what are the faculties, what kind of research are they doing. And I applied to the school mainly because the research that was being undertaken at the school was in close alignment with the questions that I was asking or the questions that I was interested in. And so that really helps you to also identify not just a degree, but a particular school and distinguish a particular school from the others. It also helps to understand if, for example, you have a very niche interest and you're not able to find any direct relation, a school which offers that. It also helps to see if the school has affiliations with any bodies which might offer the things that you're interested in. So if there are research bodies that they have affiliations with or have done past research with, and maybe that's where you want to work, that will be your dream job, then it's a good, it might be smart to apply to that school. So those are some considerations that you have to keep in place. It also really helps to look at what are the recent graduates or people who have graduated 2 or 3 years into the program doing now. It helps to know that because that will give you an indication of what are the job opportunities like after that school and what are your alums doing. And if you were to connect to them after you graduate, then if they can help you get your desired job or internship, so all of that really helps. You can also ask us in the Q&A session about our experiences. So happy to help you with that. But mainly I wanted to touch upon what are the meta things when you're even thinking about an MPP, and hope this will be a useful guide for you to use as you're thinking about what degree to apply for. Over to you, Daksh.
Okay, thanks so much, Garima. So that was the why an MPP. Let's now get into weeds of how to do it actually, what the processes are and what the timelines are and that sort of things. So I'll start with the timeline. Most MPP programs have their application deadlines between December and January of the preceding year. So if you're coming into 2024, the application submissions are currently going on. There are 2 kinds of deadlines that various schools have that I found in my research. One is a one-shot application, which is you just everybody submits the application at the same time. For example, the Kennedy School only has 1 application deadline. There are others who have staggered. This is round 1, round 2, round 3. And like all applications, the probability of you getting in decreases as you go past the rounds. So it's best to apply in round 1. That being said, it's still not too late to apply for the MPP this year, provided that you have some idea of why you want to apply and you have some of this material that I'm going to cover ready at hand. So the decisions are usually communicated between 4 to 8 weeks. Different schools have different timelines for when they release the decisions. And some of this, I think, is strategic. European schools usually release it earlier. The US schools do it later on. And then you have to accept, you have to reserve your seat. So that's another conundrum that we can talk about in the question and answer session. But I think there's some strategic value to doing this entire exercise, thinking about when the decisions are going to be released. So in terms of an indicative preparation of timeline, I just mapped out how I thought about it. It might differ for you. It will definitely differ for you if you are working and preparing an application at the same time. If you are only preparing an application and not doing anything else, the timelines will differ. So this is for me, this is what I did. And I was working at the time. So I had to spend my 9 to 5 work. And then I was doing all of this parallelly. So I entered the Kennedy School in August of 2022. So I submitted my applications in 2021. So I started researching pretty early. So these are all the questions that Garima just talked about. Why you want to do an MPP, what's your motivation, where do you want to go, what's the research, what is going to cost you, and everything else. You need to have a master plan of where you're going to apply and why you're going to apply, where you're going to apply. And this will help you in your essays as well. So I started doing this back in May. I have an entire tracker. I can send it out to you guys if you want. So this just lists out what universities are there, what are my preferred choices, what requirements they will have, what is their fee structures, what are their various application deadlines, what are the things that I'll need to submit to get considered, and things like that. So the sooner you start preparing these sort of things, the better it will be in designing your entire application process. The second is one of the most important components of your application will be the GRE or the IELTS, the English tests. There are exceptions available to both of these tests in most of the universities now, because after the pandemic, these institutions have realized that not everyone is on an equal footing when it comes to these tests. So do check on the website of these programs. They usually say if they have exemptions, and if not, feel free to reach out to the admissions committees or to the program directors specifically, and ask them if there are exemptions available and how to get that exemption if you don't want to give the GRE or the IELTS. Usually it requires the submission. For example, for GRE, it requires the submission of a quantitative resume. So courses that you have taken that prove that you can do quant, or for English, for IELTS is usually a certification by your previous academic body saying that your coursework was done in English. So there are exemptions available. Do check them out. It might not be the case that you will have to give both these exams. I did. You might not have to. And so May to August is the standard timeline for this. I dedicated 3 months to preparing for these, and then I gave the exams, single shot exams. Did okay-ish, so not too bad. Then the next step I would say is to start preparing a master document. What I mean by a master document is you list anything and everything that you've done, your motivations, your work experiences, your academic life, your extracurriculars, and everything. You just start listing them down. No need to expand on anything. Just start listing them down one by one by one. If it's in chronological order, the better. How this will help is that when you design your different applications down the line, you can draw on this document rather than starting afresh every time. So this really helped me in, first of all, I didn't forget anything that I wanted to add. And the second is, once you have this corpus of text with you, you can always just edit. You can make copies of it and edit, so that you don't have to rethink every time. Your story is going to get aligned at a point. You are going to submit the same story to different schools, possibly with slight variations, but not that much. And this master documents really help in doing that. So that's the idea behind how to prepare a master document. Your recommenders are another important part of your application process. I would say approach them early, take their buy-in, just ask them. These are probably your professional bosses or managers and your academic professors. Speak to them, ask them if they're comfortable writing the letters of recommendations for you, and then keep reminding them, because these are very busy people usually, so they tend to forget. So ask early. And then I would say 3 to 4 months, just keep once a month, just check in with them saying that, do I need to submit anything? Do you need some information on my application? How I'm pursuing this, why I'm pursuing this, and that sort of a thing. so that it helps them in building your recommendation letter to the schools that you will be applying to. Next is writing your essays. As I said, once you have the master document, just look at the website of the program that you're applying to. They will give you a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. So, for example, the Kennedy School website, the MPP program, it clearly highlights that they're looking for 6 or 7 qualities in an incoming student. Then try and tailor a little bit. Tell your story, of course, that's the most important part. But then strategically tailor your master list to fit into some of these boxes. Not one-on-one, but try to highlight experiences that portray that you have that kind of skill which they're looking for. Admissions committees, this is one thing aside, is that admissions committees are super smart. These guys have been doing it for a very long time, so they can immediately recognize what you're doing and why you're doing it. So be very strategic about these things when you make your applications. They are going to read it for like 5 minutes, and the first impression is going to be crucial. So you need to hit all the nails right when they read your applications. So write your essays, first drafts, show it to your peers, show it to, if you are in the mentorship program, show it to your mentors. My suggestion on this is that take feedback and then discard the whole thing out. Write afresh again. How this helps, it's called the process of creative destruction. It's pretty famous. How this helps is that it does not bound you to what you have written in the past, but it allows you to take in everything that you've done till now and the feedback and then write afresh. So the more times you do this process, the tighter your application essays are going to be. This is what I found. It might not work for you, but this is generally the case, that if you put everything aside that you've done and start anew, it will help you in concentrating your thoughts even more. And again, then it's a process of just cutting down, deleting, then rephrasing, then editing. So it's a whole process, and you have to do this several times in order to come to the final product. One thing I would say that's underappreciated is go to the application portals early whenever they open and look for what these guys are looking for. So, for example, what happens is sometimes they just say, you just assume that you have to submit your essays and you're done. That's not the case. There are a lot of other fields that need to be filled out. For example, your personal details, your contact details, your academic details, your degrees and everything. So you need to get that entire information set in order for you to go through them pretty quickly and then come to your essays. So have that broad outline of each school's application systems so that you have the requisite information necessary. Most of these schools, they allow you to do it in multiple rounds. So you can save your application and then come back. Some of them don't. So it's best to have all the information at hand. And then submission of the applications, they usually occur around November to December is the timeline. And then they go on till January or depending on the number of seats they have. So all in all, to say, it's not a haphazard process. You have to develop a structured process in order to do this well. That's the takeaway. And it's not too late to apply to the MPP this year again. Ms. Ba, next slide, please. Okay, so on work experience requirement, I'll go through this fairly quickly. So first of all your work experience might not be relevant work experience. You want to be very picky in what you highlight to these schools, in what you want to tell them. Remember, these are also human beings. They also get information overload. So if you include so much stuff that they get confused, it defeats the purpose of your application. You need to point to them why you are the person to be in this program, right? And for that, you need to tailor your applications very specifically. Your work experience, if you have much more, try to tailor it down to saying why this work experience matters to this application. What will I use from my work experience and what will I gain here additionally? So things like that. In terms of full-time versus part-time versus internships, different schools count this differently. Full-time is usually considered quote-unquote full-time. For internships, some schools consider them as half credits as to full-time. I don't know how that works in different schools, but essentially if you have 6 months of an internship, they consider that to be 3 months full-time. This might differ from school to school, so you really need to check these websites out in order to see how they count. And because some of these programs have explicit work requirements, this might be important when it comes to deciding whether to apply or not, or whether you'll be rejected straight out because you don't meet the work experience requirements. What I found in general is that there are positive experiences, positive returns to gathering experience before coming to do a master's in public policy and a master's in general. This helps you both in the application process, is because you have some idea of what you have done, what you want to do when you come to the school, and what you want to do after, as compared to if you are coming straight out of undergrad. This is not to discourage undergrads applying directly, but to say that there are positive returns associated to including having some work experience before you come into a program. And also, I've noticed this across, is that in the classroom, you are going to learn much more if you have some experience, and you're going to be able to talk more and share your experiences more, just because you have that additional 2 or 3 years of experience as compared to someone who doesn't. So that's a consideration to take into account. The final points, some of the points are the average work experience. Many schools don't say it out loud, but a very good proxy of this is look at the previous batch. All of these schools put out statistics in number of how many people they got in, what the nationalities are, what the average age distribution is, average work experience requirements are. Look at these things. They are fairly indicative of what the programs are looking for. So if it's not explicitly stated, which it is sometimes, just look at the profiles of the students in the past batches of your own program or of other programs of that university. What I found is 2 years is a minimum thing for entering a master's. And 5 to 8 years, you start to come up to the point where you get decreasing returns after that, if you wait to apply to an MPP kind of degree. Again, as was said before, current students and recent graduates are your best resources on this. Just reach out to them. I've never found anyone, there might be some coordination issues on this, but no one will say no to you right away, right? So do reach out. I mean, this is something that I did not do, and I still regret not doing, is that I did not reach out to my peers, I did not reach out to my seniors, and I did it all on my own. But you have help, so use that help. It's a great resource for you. Ms. Next slide, please. Okay, this I think I've covered. I just go through the list very quickly. Essays are not the entire application. As I said, look very closely at what they're asking and tailor your application to what they're asking, not what you want to say. The application components are details. First of all, they ask you to fill your name, family, background details, education, where you went, what you did there, what your year of graduation was. Transcripts are another part of this. Some universities accept student uploaded transcripts, most don't. So you have to figure out a way for your university, your previous university, to send your applications, the official transcripts, to your destination school. So that's something that you need to figure out. Some colleges in India do this, undergrads and postgrads do this directly, registrar to registrar, but some don't. So you have to apply for a third-party verification of your documents. That's a whole different process. So do take these things into account. Apart from this, there are the resume and CV. It's a first shot look at whatever you are, your profile. They can see there. Then you have your personal and other essays, test scores if needed. If you have some publications, they help greatly. There is always an explanation space if you have some kind of timeline discrepancy on your CV, is that you did not work for a year, you took some time off, or you did not do well on one of the semesters in your undergrad. There is always some space to explain why that was the case. So I would suggest that if you have those kinds of gaps on your application, do use this space to explain what happened, why that happened, and how you overcame it. It just adds to your application, and also it counts for why you didn't do well during that part. Then there are references, of course, letters of references. Generally, how this comes in is when you enter the details of the referee, they send the referee a direct email and the referee directly uploads there. So you won't have any interaction in this. So it's most important that your referees know that there are requests coming in from this school, because I assume that you are going to be applying to multiple schools. You might want to spread out your referees accordingly. And some colleges also require writing and coding samples. We can talk about that if any of the colleges do require this. Scholarship and funding essays might be a little different from this. Generally, what happens is when you submit your academic application, quote unquote, you're automatically considered for some scholarships that the school is offering. But then there are other funding sources that I think we'll go into later, which might require some additional essays because they're geared towards a specific clientele. So that might be separate, and it's very good to find this out earlier rather than later, and then you're scrambling at the end to do this. Plan ahead, of course, and reach out to your peers again, as I said. So as part of your essays, sometimes you are required to submit a policy paper or a policy brief. This can come from the publications that you've had. This can come from an idea that you've had in the past. Uh, it's not like an economics paper, so don't worry too much about it. It's just that they want to see the idea behind submitting this is that they want to see your thinking on a kind of problem, whether you are approaching it from one very specific vantage point, or do you have a more holistic view of what it means to solve that problem. So it's the ability to both apply theoretical knowledge to real world policy challenges. And I think that's at the core of any MPP program that you'll apply to. Critical thinking, problem solving skills, the standard phrases. So I stop here and I'll hand it over.
Great, thanks, Daksh. So some of the application processes might also involve a step with an interview. And so for interviews, usually the universities would already provide some tips regarding what they would be expecting in an interview. It could be an optional step as well, seeking some clarification on your application. But this is quite an interesting and a useful opportunity for you to be able to interact with the interviewers, with the admission committee or your potential professors, depending who might be on the interview panel, and tell a bit more about your application, as well as put a face to your application, which would really add on to for them knowing you better, and for you to also express and address the issues you might be having and why you're passionate about the program that you want to pursue. So some basic tips for the interview would be, I would say that in an Indian system, we are, it is quite a hierarchical system, and it could be that in an interview panel, you might feel intimidated. But from my experience, at least, I would tell that it is a different experience when you're applying to international universities in terms of how interviewers interact with you. And so it would be useful to not be intimidated, be confident, start with a personal pitch where you are introducing yourself and you know what you're going to introduce yourself with. It could often happen that because you are a bit scared, initially you are blabbering a lot of random things. So it is very useful to prepare beforehand a personal pitch with which you would start. And then you kind of start engaging in a conversation with your interviewers instead of having a very disconnected, they ask you a question, you respond to the question, sort of a setup. And not only that, it's just them who would be asking you questions, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. And rather, it's very beneficial that you ask questions because it shows that you're curious about the program, you want to know more, you're serious about pursuing it, and it would help you as well to better prepare for what's coming once you get selected. Some practical tips about the interview, which may seem very little things, but believe me, they could potentially make or break your interview. If it is in a virtual setting, which it might be quite a lot of times, check your environment. Make sure that you're in a silent room. It's good. There's good lighting. You're not being disturbed by somebody in the middle of your interview. Also check your equipment way beforehand. Check that the audio is working well, the video is working well, it's all clear. And join in for the interview several minutes before. So you can, once again, 10-15 minutes before the interview, you can check that everything is in place. The last minute, it's very important to avoid these last minute glitches so that you also feel well prepared and your confidence is not a bit shaky just because there were a bit of glitches initially. One important thing is to never forget to send a thank you email or a thank you message right after the interview. Again, it might seem a little thing if you forget, and might not be that important in bigger scheme of things, but it could also be a make or break point. And a thank you email, a very polite email showcasing gratitude would impress your interviewers as well, and again showcase how you're serious about the program you want to pursue. Next slide, please. I think there is one before. Oh, this is okay. All right. Well, now about the scholarship opportunities. So we understand that funding might be a big issue for a lot of people, especially with the bigger schools with quite a considerable financial burden. So there are scholarships available for that reason. And there are two different types of scholarships you might want to look at. So just to term them in a way, internal scholarships and external scholarships. What we mean by internal scholarships here is that these scholarships are offered by the universities or by the program, by the particular school which offers the program you want to pursue. And these scholarships are managed by those universities and their departments. For example, there's a few examples here, like for the US, there's some financial aid and fellowships. For the UK, there's Felix Scholarship. There are scholarships, several targeted scholarships at Oxford. In France, at Sciences Po, we have the Émile Boutmy Scholarship, which is provided by the university. So it's important to check which of these scholarships are available for the program you're pursuing. Additionally, there could be some targeted scholarships within the department, but provided by some philanthropic group or some not-for-profit group, some bigger organization, but for that particular program or that particular university. So it's always good to check. And I believe Project EduAccess itself is a very useful resource for that. There are several videos already if you go on their YouTube channel or on their website. So that could be a good point to start when you start researching for the scholarships. And once you start researching, there would be more that would keep coming. Then external scholarships, what we mean here is the government and the private body scholarships. So there could be, it could be from the Indian government, from the state governments. Try to check that, because there are a few scholarships which are by the state governments as well, to especially help marginalized communities who are trying to go abroad for their higher education. Then there are governmental scholarships in the countries you want to come to. For example, there's Chevening in the UK, there's Fulbright in the US, there's Erasmus Mundus, which covers several European universities. And there is a Charpak Master Scholarship in France. There is also Eiffel scholarships. And these are not really specifically for the program or for the discipline. They are more broad scholarships, but your program, especially public policy, does come under these scholarships more or less. And additionally, in India, there are other not-for-profit organizations and philanthropic organizations as well, which provide such scholarships. There might be less information and the process could be complicated to figure out. But once you look into these and also look into the people who might have received it in earlier years, it could be very useful. For example, there is Rotary, which provides scholarships for certain disciplines. However, the information is not much present on the internet especially. So it's good to seek out people who have received it in previous years and ask for their guidance. So for the scholarship application, it would be on the similar lines, but not the same. It requires you to add on a bit more than just telling the admission committee why you're passionate about the program. It also requires you to tell how your financial situation and how the financial investment the university or the organization or whoever is the one providing you the scholarship will be making in you would be useful, and how you would be useful, how you would utilize the amount that you would receive currently and also in future. Practically, there might be a few more documents and a few more points in the eligibility criteria for scholarships. For example, in the Emil Boutmy scholarship at Sciences Po, so you can apply for it while you're submitting your application for the program. But they require you to submit for the scholarship your financial documents to know what is the annual income of your family, so that it could help them figure out your needs. So these could be some points to keep in mind for scholarship opportunities. And I would highly suggest you to look into already the resources shared by Project EduAccess on scholarship. It's really a good starting point. Next slide, please. So we come to the career options now. What after, once you're done with your degree? And I believe you're doing degree because you have certain type of career already in your mind, and which would be also very hopeful and useful for your application, for your admission application. Because when, as we discussed earlier, in your application, why the program, why the university, and why you. But in the why you part, it's not just why you want to study the program currently, it's also that what do you want to do with the program and the skills you would receive while studying the program, what your future would look like. You already need to hint at it slightly. It does not fix what you would want to do. Of course, it would change when you're pursuing it, when you receive more opportunities. Once you are in these circles, you'll get to network a bit more, learn more about opportunities which you might not even know they exist as of now. So that's why it's already good to know what career options could be there. And we have listed some of the options here. Firstly, that you could be working in the government. You could pursue your program and be back to the country to pursue civil services. There's political consulting, where you consult the political parties, and not just, it doesn't really require you to join specifically a political party. It could be through the consulting firms who are helping out the parties. There's a local state agencies and community work you can do, so on-ground work, utilizing skills you have learned there. There's, of course, international development, which is usually quite a desired career path for several people who are coming all the way to study. There's research institutions and think tanks. Well, then there's nonprofits, non-governmental organization, consulting firms, CSR departments, advocacy organizations, and also communications. What these kind of careers require are what MPP provides you. MPP provides you with the theoretical base and the skills to research, but also to the skills to know how to implement those and how to communicate those policies that you have worked on. So these dual skills, in a way, would help you in reaching these careers. And well, there's academia as well. So if you're more academia oriented, if you're more research oriented, MPP could lead to a doctorate in public policy. And now we see more and more public policy doctorate students helping a lot in enriching the academic side of public policy. It's truly a combination, and also a safe degree choice in that way, because it would empower you in both the skills, and then it's up to you to decide which side you want to lean more on. Finally, next slide, please. So we go on general tips now, which is also a way to conclude what we already have heard all this time. So starting early is very important. The earlier you start, the better it is. Personally, I had started researching already when I was in the second year of my undergraduate. So it really helped. The more information you can get, the more options you have in that way. Um, there cannot be anything more empowering than having as much information as possible. And for that, you have to start early, but yet it's not too late again to apply right now also, if now is when you've received the information that you needed. Like Daksh was mentioning earlier, it could be very useful to maintain a master document and a tracker document. It could be a simple Excel sheet or a Word document where you are putting in what universities you want to apply on, what are the deadlines, what are the requirements. It just keeps you organized so that you do not forget. There'll be a lot of things you would be doing simultaneously. So just putting it somewhere is going to keep you on track. Well, again, the three big questions to keep in mind while you're writing your statement of purpose, while you're choosing the program as well, first of all, then your statement of purpose, your scholarship applications, your interview, if there might be, why public policy, why the school, and why you at this university doing this program, and what do you want to do after. Very important. So current and recent graduates could be very useful guides and mentors to you. And again, this emphasizes the importance of networking. So if you have, for example, LinkedIn accounts, or if you have alumni groups of your university, it could be very much beneficial for you to seek out these people, and I believe people would be very happy to help. Public policy, as we discussed earlier too, is a very interdisciplinary field. So even if you have done one thing, for example, if you worked in nutrition, you could still be pursuing public policy. If you worked in urban development, urban planning, or if you've studied geography, you can still be in studying public policy. If you studied political science, sociology, there's just so many options. Even tech, for example, that could lead you down to public policy. So try to see which is your field, what you liked working most on, what is the issue that you're mostly passionate about, and I'm pretty sure you'll find a way to weave it in your public policy application, because there has to be a policy for that too, if possible. And I know that would mean that could differ for a lot of people, because you might not have time, you might not have resources. Completely fair. It's not necessary, but only if it's possible. Maybe it could be helpful to take some voluntary initiatives, volunteer within NGO, with some philanthropic organization, with some local agency that you might have access to, or do some on-field research work. So work a few months, 3 months, 6 months as a field researcher, be on ground, because the on ground insights and perspectives are very much appreciated when you come to the universities here. Perspectives from the global south, insights from the global south, how you engage with the demographic of the global south that you might be further into your degree, be researching on, be working on a project. So having these insights of community work would be very helpful. And again, there's the work experience and relevant internships. So again, if that is possible for you to gain some work experience, maybe take a gap year or two after your undergraduate and work, intern for a bit. It could really make your profile shine, because public policy is a very practical program, and these skills would help you really more engage with the program. And finally, yes, take the leap of faith, and you'll see where it would take you. But all these tips would be really, really helpful. And also, if there is, if it doesn't come the first time, it's a practice. It takes practice writing all this. It's a cycle. It doesn't mean that if it didn't work out the very first time or one time, it might not work out the next. The more you practice, the more better you get at it. So yes, and all the best with the applications. I believe here we conclude. There's something somebody else would like to add on to the general tips. Please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Daksh.
Garima, you want to add something to that? I have a couple of points.
No, mostly all good. Thank you, Gauri.
Okay, I'll just add 3 points, very quick points to that. One is there's a very good analogy that one of our professors uses here, is that public policy professionals are to economists what doctors are to biologists. So if you're sick, you don't go to a biologist, you go to a doctor. So if a country is sick, if there is a problem, you don't go to an economist, you go to a public policy professional who can integrate that knowledge and apply it to policy frameworks. It's a useful way to think about why you want to do public policy instead of an econ degree. I have nothing against economists. I'm an economist myself. But public policy is just a more applicative way to apply your brains to a particular problem rather than just studying it and building theoretical models out of it. This is what I found. You might find different. If you do, please reach out to me. I'm very happy to do this debate over and over again. The second point that I had is not all programs have an interview component to it. So you have to be that much more important. Your applications becomes that much more important. So be very strategic about what you put into your applications, what you are portraying, what you want the application committee to see. It's not, so it's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put anything and everything into your application, the committee will get confused as to what is it that the students wants us to see. What are the qualities that I have, what the quality he or she has, which make him or her a fit for this program. So you have to be very intentional with what you put into your essays. And the third, and I think this is the most important one, is be intentional in whatever you do. If at the end of the day, you can justify why you are putting something in, why you're applying somewhere, why this field, why me, whatever, if you can justify it to yourself, it's going to be okay. If you can't, if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, if you're just doing something voluntarily because it will appear on your CV and you don't have any inherent individual value that comes out of it, it's going to be very difficult to justify it to yourself, not to anyone else. So my conclusion for this is be very intentional in why you do what you do. So that's about it. I'll stop here and happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thanks, Ms. Babu, to you.
Sorry, what did I do? Thank you so much, Daksh, Garima, and Gourangi for such a comprehensive presentation, being so detailed, and sort of really covering almost everything that is relevant for masters in public policy applications. We've now moved to the Q&A part of the workshop. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and ask your question. You can also put your questions in chat and we'll read it out and answer the question. You can also send it to any one of us on personal chat if you prefer. There is one question that came to my direct message, so I can start with that, which is if the speakers could talk about the difference or the pros and cons between a 1-year MPP and a 2-year MPP, and if Garima can talk a bit about the policy brief that is required for the Oxford application. So if anyone wants to take these questions.
I can talk a little bit about 1 year versus a 2-year MPP. So I think what really truly matters is that what curriculum is closer to you, and if the 1-year program is offering what you want versus the 2-year program. So I think that's the first thing that you will need to look at. The 2-year programs comes with the advantage that you have more time to do internships. You have more time to, just settle into a new country if you're doing it abroad. And so that gives you an added advantage to get valuable experience before you look for your first job. So that's always an added advantage. The disadvantage of doing a 2-year program is the opportunity cost. So I don't mean just the money that you have to spend. So it's more money that you'll have to spend on just living abroad, on the fees, etc. But also you will spend one more year being out of the workforce, or in other words, preparing for the workforce. So what I would really say is that go for the first and foremost, look at the curriculum, look at the program. If the program offers everything that you want, then definitely go for a 2-year-long degree. If there is a concern around doing a 2-year-long degree, then concerns related to opportunity costs, and if you don't want to spend 2 years, then a 1-year program can be equally good, depending on the curriculum offered by that school. Anybody wants to add to this? I did a 1-year program, so I might be biased towards it, but yeah, I know other people on the panel have done different programs.
I'm on the opposite end for this. I particularly stayed away from 1-year programs. My primary concern with this was that if I have to come back to India, a master's, a quote-unquote master's, is usually seen as a 2-year thing. And if you do a 1-year thing, it's generally considered a diploma or that sort of a thing. So that was the only consideration. I mean, all these universities that you guys are going to apply to are at the top of the world, right? So it doesn't matter. My was just semantics, is that I'll get to do more and I'll get to show more on my resume or my CV. So that was the only consideration that I had.
I would just quickly add on to it, because so I did a 2-year master and I took a gap year in between because my university allowed me to take a gap year to do internships. And my master was organized in a way that I had 3 semesters which were in class. So basically just taking classes. And the final semester had several options. In the 4th semester, either we could do an internship or a master thesis, or a personal project, which is just at Sionspor individually working on some initiative which you believe would be helpful in the policy sphere. So I, after my first year, I took a gap year, although it does add on to the cost, because during gap year also, at least at Sionspor, you have to pay part of the tuition fee. But in my gap year, I could do 2 internships, 6 months each, because you cannot do, at least in France, more than that for an internship. I came back in my M2, my second year, for the 3rd semester in class. And then in my 4th semester, I chose to do a master thesis, but I was still doing an internship part-time. So this way I could have a benefit of doing the internships, being connected to the internships and the organization, but also do a master thesis, which I really wanted to do personally. So in that way, I did not lose on either of the opportunity.
And there was also a question about the policy brief that has to be prepared, and just tips on writing that for the MPP at Oxford. So Garima and maybe Samir, if you can also chip in for that.
Yeah, so I think the policy brief guidelines have also changed a little bit. So I'll ask Samir to chip in on that. The one broad tip that I have when you're writing policy brief for any school is try to be analytical and not, have your opinion, but it should be based on the analysis that you have done. So this is what schools really look for, that if you can weigh the pros and cons, and if you can give a balanced, or at least an analyzed standpoint, it helps to be specific, because there are word limits always. So it helps to be specific so that you can look into a specific question. It helps to outline some specific questions which you're inquiring at the very top, or just to give some context to a particular policy that you're doing. It also helps to probably write on something that you know more about, because it just saves your effort of doing the research, but that's not a requirement. Over to you, Samir, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is also related to the question that's in chat. So Oxford MPP requirements and guidelines have changed just a little bit this year, both for the personal statement as well as for the policy brief. So I'll first talk about the policy brief. Until last year, it was, as Garima mentioned, and as everyone else also pitched in earlier, a policy brief, you could take any topic and write about that. And maybe analyze a particular policy. This year they have made it into a reflective policy essay. So you reflect on something as opposed to just analyzing, and there is some difference there. And the requirements or the guidelines that they have put is you're required to submit a reflective policy essay based on the following brief. Then for 300 words, you have to write about a situation you experienced where a lack of good policy and or poor implementation created an undesirable outcome. Now, you can't just take any topic and write about that. You have to think of a policy whose implementation created an undesirable outcome or where there was lack of a good policy. So you have to pick either or, right? Or like both of them. And then for around 1200 words in the same document, you have to write an analysis from the perspective of a public servant, citizen, or a commentator, whichever you feel is closest to your experience, of what went wrong, what could have been done differently, and propose recommendations that would produce better outcomes going forward. So in a sense, they have already given you the structure that you should follow in your policy brief or reflective policy essay. And you can choose, as I said, as it mentions, you can choose any vantage point. If you're a public servant, have a career in public service or civil service, then you can talk from that experience. But if you're a, and this relates to the question, if you're a citizen and were impacted by a particular decision, whether it's a national level decision or a local level decision, you can write about that as well. I don't think there is any preference one way or the other. Whatever you are able to write in the strongest possible manner, whatever is the strongest piece, write it from that vantage point. The second requirement that the Oxford MPP program has is a public service essay. It is a 400-word essay, mostly relating to public service. So, and again, the guidance is there on the website. And the other thing that I mentioned was this year, the guidance for what's it called? Your personal statement has also changed. Oxford requires an 800-word personal statement. And now there are specific questions that you need to answer. And this was also in the slide somewhere that some policy programs will require you to respond to prompts, in which case you can never ignore those prompts and you must just stick to those prompts and not, talk about an overarching narrative. You can, of course, using those prompts, create that narrative, and it is important that you do, but you can't just write a random personal story without answering those prompts. So, for example, the Oxford one asks you what motivates you to apply for the MPP, and that's this MPP, right? Oxford MPP and not an MPP more generally. What is it critical? Why is it critical for your next steps in public service? Is it for 200 words? Outline your career plan for the next 5 to 10 years and explain how your work will serve others and drive positive change. Another 200 words. Describe the most significant and impactful work you have done. What could you have done differently to be more impactful? 200 words. Once again, Daksh's point, that work experience, although Oxford MPP does not require formally work experience, but because there is this prompt, there is some expectation that you have work experience. And if you look at the cohort profile over the years, you will see that there is preference for people with work experience on the Oxford MPP. The next is describe a situation where if you had to lead a project and or a team, what was the outcome and what did you learn from the experience? Another 200 words. So 200, 200, 200, 200, amounting to 800 words. Now, it's not a personal statement the way we are generally used to writing a personal statement. It is a personal statement that caters and responds specifically to these prompts, and you can't ignore any of the 4 and then subdivide it into 8 prompts that are there. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. I'm sorry I took a bit of time.
No worries. Thanks, Amin. So we have 2 raised hands, so maybe we can ask them to ask their questions and then go back to the questions in chat. So Nitisha, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I have 3 questions. Should I go at once or?
I think all of together, so it's quicker.
Okay, great. My first question is, so MPP is one of the most competitive degrees out there, right? And I'm looking at the UK universities, and I do not have much impressive grades as such. So how can I make my case stronger? Especially when I'm applying to such a course. Of course, I do have work experience, but still, I'm very hesitant. Especially like a course MPP at Oxford, right? And my second question is, while choosing the courses, I most of the course curriculum is similar in most of the public policy, uh, uh, whatever. So, so how can we how can we finalize and shortlist the universities we want? So because I know one is the reputation and everything, but if you can share any additional points in picking out the criteria and finalizing, and the third one being so again, I think few even in public policy there is there just sorry. So even in I think policy there is few departments focus on different segments of policy. Like I think again Oxford has another course called evidence-based policy, right? So again how so when there are different, again, I think that comes under different department altogether, even though it's talking about policy. So how do we understand a how do we view policy only under different departments, like in across the universities? Sorry, I think there are much like larger questions, but yeah.
I can quickly take the question about academic requirements and comparing Oxford policy course with the social evidence-based social intervention course. So basically, Oxford can be an intimidating place, and so everyone believes that they need to be toppers. That is not true. That is a myth. Having said that, they do require proven academic achievement or potential, right? The website says that's one of the 3 criteria. So what they are really looking for is they're looking for somebody who has an intellectual and academic appetite to study the subjects that they want to teach at a policy degree. Now, if you have an undergrad in one of those subjects, one, that is a potential to show, and your grades in that particular program is a potential, it can show if you have the appetite or intellectual curiosity to study those subjects. If you don't have good grades, if you have average grades and you come from a humanities background, what I would suggest is use your application, or if there is an option. I don't think in Oxford you have an optional essay, but in other universities you do. Use that to explain why you have poor grades. Is it because you don't like the subject? If that is the case, you should not study policy. It is probably because you were not good at, something happened that particular year, or you did not thrive in that particular kind of pedagogical space. And so if that's the case, use that you explain to the schools why you performed poorly, in case you performed poorly. What also helps is one degree, like their grades are just one part of your application. So what helps is to strengthen other parts of your application. So for example, like you mentioned, you have work experience. So if you have demonstrated excellence there, then that's one way to offset your poor grades, right? Schools might want you despite your poor grades because you are great otherwise. So your grades become just one of the many things which are part of your profile, which is good about applying abroad. It's not like you need a 99 percentile all the time. So that's the other thing. The third thing is that what you can do to improve just your academic side in general is that what helps is to take on some additional coursework, right? So what you can write the GRE, if that is one way to also offset your poor score, because if you have a good GRE, then the school have 2 data points to look at rather than just one. The other thing you can do is, if you can't do the GRE, is to do some online coursework. So there now with a lot of these portals out there, you can actually do an Oxford program, a certificate program virtually. So that's another way to signal your interest and academic appetite to study public policy before you go in there. So these are different things that you can do, mainly to say that, one, you don't need to be a topper, and there are ways to work around even if you have a poor undergrad score. Of course, if your scores are really bad, then it becomes very difficult to justify, it just becomes tougher, right? Because you're competing with students who are great. So then I would highly strongly encourage you to do everything possible to just build a good profile, if in other departments. I hope that answered your question. If there anybody wants to add anything to that.
I mean, I didn't apply to Oxford. There seems to be a lot of confusion about this, so maybe Project EduAccess can do a different thing about it. But I can answer the question on how you select schools. So first of all, do this before you get before you get your decisions in. That's the most important part, because after you get your application decisions, you are biased. So you have to do this before. And the criteria that I used were fivefold. One is alignment to you, and this includes what you have studied, what your experience has been, and what your future aspirations are. So if the school is good on those, it gets a higher score as compared to other schools in that same league. First is alignment. Second is faculty. It's another important part. Some people come to some schools to specifically study under specific faculties. That's one more thing. Costs, of course, are a huge thing. Costs and scholarships. The fourth is future income streams. You might want to look at that. And the fifth, I think, which is underappreciated, is prestige. Is that a lot of these good universities have names that you'll carry for the rest of your lives, which will open doors for you that you won't have otherwise thought of. So these are the five, rough criteria that you can use to rank your schools. I had a ranking before when I made my applications and before I got my decisions. You can do so too. I found this to be a useful framework to decide what your preference list is. So hope that answers a part of the question.
I hope that has answered all your questions, Nitisha. Ritam, do you want to ask your questions?
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for organizing this. This has been really helpful. Like, I was a little overwhelmed with what all is happening with the college application, but this clears a lot of things. Thank you so much. Again, I also have a list of questions. My first question is for Daksh specifically. I understand your point about economics, like a public policy being an overarching degree than economics. But would you have a similar point of view for courses like for example, Oxford has a course that is MSc in economics for development, which is sort of an overlapping area with the public policy field. Does that apply to that as well? That would you still prefer a public policy course? Do you think that is still has wider applicability than that course?
Yeah, I would still go for a
Okay.
public policy course, is because within that public policy course, you always have an option to diversify your skill set. So for example, if I'm doing a public policy course, but my interests are, let's say, poverty alleviation and social protection, I can always take courses in poverty alleviation and social protection while maintaining the flexibility to do other things in my schedule. So having a larger thing to start with helps, and then you can double down on what you want to study. So that would be my short answer to that question.
All right, makes sense. Or did I have
Sorry,
questions on
I
that?
would like to add on to
Yeah,
that
please.
just quickly. Although public policy would be a very broad, you can do a lot of things under it. An economics degree is really, really appreciated, at least in the European circle. Because an economics degree, maybe it being, economics in development, that's very particular. Just an economics degree would really help you in the sense that you could still work on policy. In economics, you would also study statistics, perhaps, which again, you could be a data analyst, you could work on policy from the data analyst side, especially from where I work, in the spheres I work. Being an economist is very much appreciated. It is a very provable skill in a way. And
All right.
you can keep working on public policy, but public policy is more of a generalist thing, which opens many doors for you. But maybe at some point in your career, you will have to specialize in something. For example, in my stream, in my MPP, I specialized in social policy and social innovation. So you have to have something that you're kind of specializing in.
Yeah. All right, makes sense. And also, which brings me to my next question. If I apply to two courses in one university, does that affect my chances, or should I choose like one course per university or college? I'm liking multiple courses at this point because I'm looking at intersections of economics and policy. But if it's affecting my chances, I'd like to shortlist one.
Your applications are assessed by those specific departments, so they don't really know that you've made multiple applications, so it doesn't hamper, the success of your application. But obviously, it does come with a cost. So if you're applying to colleges or universities that have a high application fee, and if that works for you, then that's fine. But otherwise, you have to sort of pick the courses.
Alright, so as per the for the selection and evaluation process, there's no disadvantage in that regard, right?
No.
Alright, that's a relief. And
Just sorry,
sure.
just quick clarification.
No.
Even if the departments know that you applied to multiple programs, there's no problem at all. And as Ms. Ba said, those are evaluated by the respective departments, and sometimes departments compete with each other to get the best candidates. So if you apply to multiple programs and they think you're great, they will try and push you for recommend you for a scholarship, nominate you for something here and there. So there is generally no problem at all, unless the university itself, prevents you from making multiple applications.
All right, okay. And so I was thinking of applying this year, but I understand that the timeline is a little short right now for fall 2024 session. So do you I was applying for a few colleges this year. Do you think, let's say if I get an admission letter, is it possible to easily get it deferred to the next cycle? Because I'd like to make an informed choice later. If I get into if I get into some place right now, I'd still like to have for example, Harvard is closed right now. I missed that deadline. So is getting your admission deferred a big deal, or is it doable?
I would say it's quite doable. I did that. I got an admission in 2019 and I finally went in 2020. So for me, it was not, I think you just get just 1 year. So that's all. You cannot defer it twice.
All right. No, that makes sense. And yeah, sorry, please, Daksh, go ahead.
So deferrals have come into the picture primarily because of COVID. I would say a lot of the people that applied in 2019-20 went on later on because there was a credible deferral option, right? It might not be the case because think of this from the committee's perspective, right? When an admissions committee is choosing the entire cohort, they choose you because you have certain value to that cohort, right? They're comparing you to the peers in your selection year timeline, right? You might not hold the same value later on, right, to a different cohort, right? So think from the committee's perspective whether that makes sense. Of course, if you have a credible argument of saying that I can't join this year for some reason or the other, it's completely fine, but it has to be justified. You just can't say that I want to research more and that's why I want to defer. It's because so you have to consider both of these factors in making that decisions. Yeah.
All right.
I'll also add in here.
Please.
For example, Oxford is not big on allowing deferrals. So it also varies from school to school and university to university. And you can imagine that some schools will just not allow deferrals at all, irrespective of what the situation is. Of course, exceptional cases they will, and in which case lack of funding is not a reason to defer, and that's never allowed, at least like in most UK universities. If you say that you didn't manage to get funding this year, so you would like to defer it for next year, generally you will not be allowed to defer. So when you are thinking of reasons, as Daksh mentioned, compelling reasons, think of reasons beyond the fact that you were not able to manage funding. The other thing that you should keep in mind while thinking about deferring is that next year you will not be eligible for all the automatic scholarships. Only the cohort that is applying that year is generally eligible for all the scholarships. So for example, if you were to apply to Oxford and manage to get a deferral this year, next year the other 50, 70 scholarships that Oxford has, they will go to students who apply next year as opposed to you, because your application was already evaluated in this cycle. So you just keep that in mind.
All right, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And so some universities also this universities that require for you to take the GRE also have an option that you could submit your scores later. Does that affect the evaluation? Because considering that it's already mid of December and the application deadlines are close, So can I take the GRE later, and like would that, like the website says I can, but like does that affect my chances is what I mean to ask.
Um, I, but if anybody wants to answer, yes, please do. You,
I
um,
So I can just say very quickly from what I learned in the GRE workshop that we did a few weeks ago, was that it depends against on the school. So sometimes if you have a really good GRE score and you submit it with your application, it does increase your chance of a success, of getting an offer. But if you're not sure about your score and it's mandatory, then I guess you can submit it later on. But if it's a good score and you submit it with the application, I think it does help in getting an offer. So that's what I know from what we had people say in our GRE session. And I'd recommend having a look at that workshop as well if it helps.
All right, makes sense. Okay, thank you
sorry,
so much. This clears yeah, please go ahead.
sorry. In addition to that, a lot of schools, especially in the UK, just don't require GRE. Whether you have GRE score or not does not matter at all, because they have other criteria on the basis of which they are assessing your application. So it really doesn't help. Yes, if you were to, for example, what Misbah said, this will apply to policy courses that are more quantitative focused. So you also have to look at what the GRE is, right? GRE is not testing, of course, it does test your analytical skills, etc. But depending on what it aligns the most with, it might help or might not. For an Oxford MPP, which is more qualitative, talks about philosophy, talks about politics, law, a GRE does not really, I mean, whether you have econometric skills, quantitative skills or not, doesn't really matter. Sure, you might have a background in that, that's okay. But the GRE there won't be able to significantly help your profile. But if you are to apply for a public policy program that is more specialized or focused on econometrics, then having a good GRE score will obviously demonstrate that you have good quantitative, analytical, and econometric, in a sense, sort of set of skills that might be helpful in the process.
All right. Okay, that clears a lot of things for me. Thank you so much, all of you. Thanks.
Okay, great. So we have a lot of questions in chat, and from what I know is that there are lots of questions in personal chat as well. Daksh and then Sameer and Garima, if you can, maybe you can answer some of the questions that came in your personal chat, and then I can read out some more questions.
Sure. Okay, I'll go over 3 questions that came into my personal chat. One is on application fees. So one thing you have to know about these universities in Europe and across the world is that they're extremely flexible on anything and everything, right? Just write to them. Just say that I'm not able to pay my application fees. Can you waive it off? I know for Chicago, they have some webinars, U Chicago, I forgot the name of the school there. But if you attend one of their webinars, they give you a coupon code which you can apply to your application. Not a coupon code, sorry, Amazon bad habits. But you can apply and then that gets waived off. So just ask them. If you just reach out to them saying that, see, I cannot pay right now. Can you please waive off? Most of them will. Some of them might not, but you don't need to worry about that. That won't be a binding constraint on your application going in. The second is, I got a question on what a referee can do. See, you have to be strategic about this. A referee can never say that I know that if I'm a referee and I'm writing an reference letter for someone, I cannot say that this student is the perfect candidate for your school, right? Because I don't know that. As a referee, I don't have the authority to say that. What they can do is say things about you that you can't say about yourself. For example, you can't boast about yourself in your applications, right? You can't say that you have some soft skills or something else, but your manager, your professional manager can. They can say that Daksh has been a team player. He has done all things on time and stuff like that, right? Which you can't say yourself because it will sound like boasting, but your referee can because they have that authority to comment. So be very strategic in what you want your referee to say. Of course, don't influence their decision in any way to write for you or what to write for you, but be in conversation with them constantly about what you are aiming for and how they can help. Most referees will be very happy to help you in them becoming a part of your story rather than them becoming the story themselves. So that's my idea on referees. And the third is there seems to be a lot of controversy about the work experience comment that I made. One is that why work experience helps is, first, in applications, it really helps because you can show that you know what you're talking about. It's not an undergrad. It's not someone who's just come out of the cocoon of a university talking about important social issues. It's you who have worked on those issues for a dedicated period of your time, and then you're talking about them. You have some ground experiences, you have some ground realities, ground truths to back up your claims. So that is how work experience can help in your applications. My second point about that was work experience can help in your classroom, in that you better understand the material that's being taught in the context of how you want to understand it. So if someone is talking about social policy implementation, let's say in Ghana or somewhere, you understand that because you can relate it to your experience. If you don't have that experience, your relation might not be as strong with that course material as it could have been. And another part of this is you can contribute more in classrooms. The third thing is the decreasing returns comment that I made is, so in the context of Harvard, there are other degrees that you can pursue if you have higher levels of work experiences. So for example, MPP is the starter if you want for public policy at HKS. So here, usually people with 2, 3, 4, 5 years come in. And then when you move up that scale, because you have been away from school for a very long time, because the MPP is a very rigorous quantitatively and qualitatively, so you might not find it as useful, but you might find it more useful to go on to a program that gives you the flexibility to do what you can rather than doing an MPP. So for example, a master's in public administration, or a master's in public administration in international development. And if you're a career civil servant with like 15, 20 years of experience, you can join the MCMPA, which is the mid-career MPA program. So my comment to that, my comment of decreasing returns after a time was in this context, that you can apply for different programs, right? You can still do public policy, that's fine. But you might not want to go through that rigor again because you already have the skills that that curriculum is going to teach you. So those are my 3 cents on the questions that I've received. Happy to answer more questions.
Thanks, Daksh. Sameer, do you want to answer the ones that came in your DM?
More than answering, it's actually just a question for everybody. For MPP applications, is it more beneficial to say that I want to work on a specific or in a specific sector, say health or environment, or is it fine to seem like a generalist who would like to work with NGOs, consulting firms, etc.? Yeah, Daksh, Gourangi, Garima.
I would say, so for me in the application, I had to choose a policy stream and I chose social policy. So then I had to be a bit specific about what I want to do further in social policy. And I think it helped because, well, I had to choose a stream. I would say it's always good to know a bit, with a bit of precision, what you want to do and what areas you're passionate about. So that really helps your application. That makes you seem like a motivated person. That also shows that you have researched well enough and well in advance of what the school is offering you and what are the career prospects after, be it you want to stay in the same country afterwards or come back to your own country. Also, it depends if so in several of these cities and in Europe especially where the universities are, there's also several international organizations which are headquartered. So in your application, you may also mention that I would like to pursue this program. Well, only if you want to, you cannot just mention it without really wanting to do it. But it's a good thing to mention if you've always wanted to work in a particular organization and it's by chance that it's also there in the same city or in the vicinity as your university. It brings a good flow. It shows you are thinking about the future, about your future internships. So yeah, it's a good balance, I would say, of both, because you still want to keep your options open and also not seem like you're very focused on a particular thing. And what if the university really does not very, very specifically offer that thing? So it could go the other way as well.
Garima, you have your hand raised. Do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think I want to add to this by asking a question. I mean, you should all ask yourself, what are you interested in? And I think what schools really care about is if your personality or what your motivations are, if they are coming across in an application. So rather than thinking about this question of whether I should specialize or not, you should really think about what is it that motivates you to apply for a policy degree and thus pursue a career in public policy? Is it because you care about children and you care about education? So your work experience could be aligned in that direction. Or is it that you care about, solving problems across the board? So then you can have different kinds of experiences. So I, for example, I have a lot of varied experience before I went in to join Oxford, and that is what mattered to me. Like getting to work with a nonprofit, then getting to work with a politician, then getting to work with a bureaucrat is what really was I curious about. And I think what really truly matters is you should think about what you are interested in, and that should come across in your application. And then whether it's specialist or generalist takes a backseat.
Great. I think one question that's come up again is just difference between MPP programs in US, UK, and Europe, and perhaps each one of you, given that you've studied in different places, can speak to why you chose to study in that specific country.
I'll just say that it was so the main difference I found is 1 year in the UK versus 2 years in the US. Most US policy schools have a 2-year master's programs. Some UK universities do have a 2 years. I don't remember. But for me, that was the primary consideration. That was the only consideration, in fact, in choosing between UK and the US. Plus, US schools have generally more connections. So I don't know how true that is, but because I'm in the US, might as well say it. So.
I would say it was several factors that differ in European universities. I found even with the prestigious ones that they were financially more feasible in a way. It's changing now slightly because, well, they're on to increasing tuition fee now, but there's also a culture of student collectives, so they're stopping them from doing that. So it's good to keep an eye on that. Also, the options to stay after in the country and what in terms of work permit, in terms of options. I would say in Europe, a peculiar thing is the language and language barrier, so to say, especially in France, that is. I knew French from before. I studied French while I was doing my bachelor's, so it was not a complete shock in a way in terms of language. But if you want, even if Paris is a very international city, there's a lot of international crowd, you still need some language skills to survive on a daily basis, do your daily things, also meet people. And also it does being bilingual, at least gradually. For example, Sciences Po offers French language courses for international students. So if you reach a good level, it would help you in getting jobs also afterwards. So that was one consideration. European universities would also provide you mobility, because with the student visa that you get, it's a Schengen visa. At least for me, it was that. It could be with several countries. And so one of the options we have at Sciences Po in the final semester is to do exchange with another university. And in that way, the university facilitates it as well, because we have a few exchange with the US universities and all. But just mobility in terms of finding work opportunities later, research opportunities also while you are pursuing your program. So doing the side hustles in a way, research internships, other part-time jobs. That's one good thing about Europe. And yeah, that was quite the consideration. And then there's the prestige also attached to it. The universities have been there for years and years. They're very well considered in the particular countries all over Europe. So it just gives you an edge in future.
Garima?
add a bit on the UK universities. So I can tell you what distinguished them from for me. I think the UK universities are, like Daksh mentioned, a year-long program. They usually offer year-long programs. So opportunity cost wise, it's good because I was entering a public policy program when I was 28 and I didn't want to commit 2 years to a degree. So that's one. I think the other, which is a more important factor, which affected my choices, was that I found UK universities to offer like to have a curriculum which also includes philosophy and political science. I did not find this a lot in the US universities, for instance, which I found to be much more quantitative. So I think Samir was alluding to the fact that the Oxford program is much more qualitative in nature. So that is something that I was really looking forward to. I have a prior degree in engineering and I feel I had strong quantitative skills already. What I wanted to really build on was the qualitative side and the reflective side, and to be able to look at a problem from a holistic lens. What I also in retrospect have found that the program at Oxford especially puts in a lot of thought and effort to make it truly diverse. By diverse, I mean that they really truly try to have the class from many different countries, and it's not just tokenism, right? They really make the effort to make sure that they have significant number of people from different countries. They also make sure that the case studies that they provide there are truly diverse in nature. So for example, there'll be a case study on Nepal. So in South Asia also, it's not just India. They look at different countries, and so I think that was distinguishes, I think, UK programs more. I would also say that I found UK universities in general to be more generous with funding opportunities, which was also an important factor for me. So yeah, those are the reasons. But also I will be biased towards the program that I attended. So please do your research and don't take all of this at face value.
I think there's a question in chat about PhD in public policy. So Sami, do you want to take those questions?
So there are a couple of questions. One, does pursuing a master's in public policy prepare for a career in academia? And do universities support that? For example, a PhD in econ or PhD in public policy. Once again, I feel like the answer to all the or most of the questions is look at the program. What is the program offering? What's its approach? What does it focus on? The Oxford MPP specifically mentions that it's not a gateway to a doctoral program. Why? Because in a doctoral program, you will generally need. Now, it also depends on where you want to do the doctorate, right? If you think of doing a doctorate in the UK, you are not taking any coursework. Once you come in onto the doctorate, you start with your research right away. So you don't have the opportunity to get that training for a couple of years as you do in the US and then start your research. So you have to already have that research training or research experience. And because the MPP program, for example, at Oxford does not offer that research experience or research training, like research methods training, therefore it's not a gateway to a doctoral program. But the Cambridge one, for example, does, and it specifically mentions. So you will have to look at the program and see whether the program aligns with a doctorate. And as I said, even then, if you were to do a doctorate in the UK, let's say at Oxford, sorry, if you were to do an MPP at Oxford and then think of applying for a doctorate in the US, that should be fine. But if you were to think of doing an MPP at Oxford and then a PhD at Oxford, that would be a bit difficult because you don't have research experience to show or research training to show. While in the case of US, you will be able to show that you have this wide set of skills and knowledge, and that you will get research training on the PhD program because that's how the PhD programs are designed. So yeah, I think it really depends. And what are the career options after pursuing a PhD in public policy? The career options after doing a PhD are primarily academia and everything else that your master's degree enables you to do, right? You become an expert on a particular topic, a particular question generally, and the field around it, and then wherever that expertise is valued, you go there. Quite often it so happens that it is in academia. But obviously, if you have interest in government, public service, you always have those options open.
Great. I think one set of questions that came commonly and in my DMs were about the kind of work experience that helps when you're making an application for public policy. So both in terms of work experience as a job and also in terms of internships. So for students who are pursuing their undergraduate or masters right now, what kind of work experience would you suggest that would help make a good application?
Please, Gourangi, go ahead.
I would say it depends on what you're planning to focus on, slightly focus on, not really, deciding beforehand. It helps to have a combination of those experiences. I think now having a bit of research experience is very valued in MPP courses because you come with certain skill sets already, and that really helps you to further understand several things in your program too. Other than that, there could be good opportunities in project management. For example, working in a project management profile with an NGO, a nonprofit, or even some company would again equip you with certain skills. Now, I would not know very much how those management consulting, the companies, how right now in India the scene is basically in terms of what they offer, or if they offer internships. But if they do, that is also a very good thing in case that is what you want to further go also. Just very practically, having, in terms of at least these management consulting firms, having a known international name kind of adds to your application that you were able to access and to get those internships. Other than that, it really depends on what you want to do, really, because and what your profile is. You could be working on field, doing work on the ground. That's also a very good opportunity. Now, instead of instead of doing some internship or gathering some work experience just because you want to apply for a certain program, might not be the best way. Rather, what you have done, what you were passionate about, what opportunities you already got, and then designing your application with your experiences and your skill set could be a better way to do it, because this is the time to also get diverse experiences and not limit yourself to just one particular field. Just try things out if you can, if you have the ability and the resources to do that. If you have limited resources and ability and opportunities, it would be good to maybe have a more targeted approach and look at what you want to study further and then find something in that particular field, I would say. So it really depends.
So I think there are two parts to this question. One is, when you are in college or when you are selecting your job, you're constrained by far more things than we can discuss in this call. What resources you have, what opportunities come your way, what time commitments do you have, etc., etc., right? A whole gamut of things, how much they're paying, where you'll be living, things, etc., etc., right? So you're much more constrained at that point, right? What you are not constrained in is selling that experience in your application as something that it was not originally intended to, but helps you build your profile, right? This is the thing that you can do. Let's say you go work for an NGO or you go work for an international organization. I think it matters equally what work you did, as equal as how you portray that work has added to your skill sets or your knowledge set, or how you will use that in the program or after that in your application. So that is something that you have much more control over when you're writing your application. So don't restrict yourself to doing specific things. Try and see, you won't have this foresight at that time, but try and see if that thing that you did before has some relevance to what you are doing now and what you will be doing in the future, and then inculcate it strategically into that direction. So that would be, I mean, that's my 2 cents on that question.
Great. I think
Well,
that,
I would
oh, sorry, Garima. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'll just add one thing is when we are thinking about relevant work experience, I think the one way to distinguish is that a lot of schools look for some kind of commitment towards public service, for some kind of commitment towards impact. So if you are really trying to distinguish between what is relevant and not relevant, is to then use that as the litmus test and see what if the work that you're doing has some impact on the society at large in a positive way. And if it does not, then how can you bring either that dimension through the narrative, as Daksh was mentioning, or how can you add to your work experience? So for example, in my DMs, I received a question from this person who's working, I think, with JP Morgan, and they are working on the analytics side of things and wondering if that's relevant work experience and how they can add relevant work experience. So prima facie, that's not relevant work experience, but what you can do is you can add on to that experience by, let's say, working on analytics side, but with an organization that is working on questions or that is working on sectors which impact people at large, and ideally people from underprivileged backgrounds, and that would become definitely much more relevant than what you're doing right now. So bringing in some kind of a social impact lens to your work experience always helps.
Okay, Gourangi, did you want to add something?
No,
No?
it's okay. We've covered.
Okay, great. I think we've covered all the questions that came in chat and in personal DMs. We're way past the scheduled time for this session to end, so I'm going to end now. If your question is unanswered, it's probably because we either covered it in the session during the PPT or it was answered by someone else in by one of the speakers through another question. I've just sent a few links in chat. So first is the link to our YouTube channel, which is where we'll upload a recording of this workshop. So in case you joined late or you missed anything or couldn't catch the PPT, you can go and have a look at the recording where you'll be able to access everything. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@projecteduaccess.com. This is only for those who are not mentees with us on our graduate mentorship program. And Daksh, somewhere in the chat, sent a tracker that he created when he was applying for MPP programs. So just in case it got lost in chat, I've put it again. So you can have a look at that spreadsheet as well. Thank you so much, Gourangi, Daksh, Garima, and Sameer, for joining us and answering so many questions very patiently. I'm sure this has been extremely helpful. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. I hope you all have a nice rest of your Sunday. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you and all the best.